The church sat at the edge of town, its white steeple rising quietly against the grey Arkansas sky. For 2 decades, Pastor James Whitmore had walked its halls, prayed beneath its wooden beams, and greeted every soul that passed through the sanctuary doors. He knew the creaks in the floors, the way the wind moaned through the rafters, and the comforting smell of old hymnals and candle wax. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until that night. It was late, long after the Wednesday night prayer group had gone home. The pews sat empty, silent. Pastor James was locking up when he heard something strange, a soft rustling sound coming from beneath the sanctuary floor. At first, he thought it might be mice in the crawl space, or maybe the furnace acting up again. But this sound was different. It had rhythm. It was cautious, almost human. He paused, keys in hand, listening. Then he heard it again. Carefully, he set down his coat and flashlight, made his way to the back corridor, and opened the trap door that led to the maintenance crawl space. The smell hit him first. Dampness, old wood, and something else. Something human. He descended slowly, flashlight beam slicing through the dusty darkness. And then, in the far corner beneath the old stone foundation, he saw them. A pair of eyes reflecting light. Wide, frozen, frightened. James froze. There, in a nest of old blankets and cardboard, was a boy. No more than 10. Dirty, thin, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. He didn't speak, just stared. James crouched low, trying to steady his voice. "Hey there, son. It's okay. You're safe now." The boy said nothing. James's heart pounded, not with fear but with something deeper, a sudden, overwhelming urge to protect. Pastor James backed away slowly, careful not to startle the boy further. He climbed out of the crawl space and closed the trapdoor gently, heart racing with questions. Who was he? How long had he been down there? Was he alone? He returned with a bottle of water and a granola bar from the pantry, placing them near the edge of the open hatch. He didn't go back down, just waited at a respectful distance. "I'll leave these here for you, all right?" he said softly. "You don't have to come out. Just eat if you're hungry." The boy didn't move at first. But after several minutes, James heard the sound of the granola wrapper crinkling in the dark. It was a start. Over the next few days, James returned again and again. He left food, warm socks, a sleeping bag. Sometimes he'd read aloud from the sanctuary, letting his voice float gently down through the wooden floorboards, stories, psalms, or just simple thoughts about the weather. He didn't try to force anything, and slowly, the boy began to trust him. On the 4th night, when James returned with warm soup in a thermos, the boy finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Is it locked?" James turned, surprised. "Is what locked?" "The door upstairs." James shook his head. "No, it's open. It's always open." The boy looked away, eyes dim. "It wasn't before." James sat on the floor above him, hands resting on his knees. He didn't press further. Instead, he spoke quietly. "You're welcome here, however long you need." In that moment, something shifted. The silence between them was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with possibility. And Pastor James knew. This was the beginning of something much bigger than he could imagine. The boy didn't reveal his name for another week. He stayed hidden in the crawl space, venturing out only when the church was empty, scavenging crackers or slipping into the bathroom to wash his face. Pastor James made sure the building stayed warm, left lights on in the hallway at night, and quietly informed the janitor to skip the basement area for repairs, he said. It wasn't a lie. Something was broken, something sacred, and James intended to help mend it. Each night, the pastor left a small note beside the meals he placed at the hatch. Just a few words. "You matter. You are not alone. Sleep safe tonight." At first, the notes were crumpled and left untouched. Then one morning, he found one carefully folded and placed on the floor beside the empty bowl. A reply. "I'm not supposed to talk to grown-ups, but you seem different." James sat down right there, heart pounding. He penned his reply on the back of a Sunday bulletin. "Thank you for trusting me. I'm just here to help if you ever want that." And so began a fragile correspondence. The boy's name eventually came out, Eli. He was 11. His father had left years ago, and his mother had struggled with addiction. The details came slowly, scattered across notes, and whispered through the vent slats. The most chilling revelation. Eli had been hiding under the church for nearly 3 weeks before James ever heard him. "I stayed quiet," one note read. "Church people don't like kids like me." James read that one over and over, his eyes stinging. How many times had he preached about compassion, about mercy? Now mercy wasn't in a sermon. It was in the form of a cold, frightened boy sleeping beneath his feet, and James knew he had to do more. James found himself thinking about Eli constantly, during sermons, while organizing food drives, even as he stood at the altar reciting the Lord's Prayer. His hands went through the motions, but his heart remained beneath the sanctuary floor, with a boy whose silence spoke volumes. One afternoon, after the Sunday service, he waited until the congregation had gone and stepped into the crawl space. Eli was curled in his makeshift nest, hugging his knees, staring into the dark. "Hey," James said gently, crouching low. "Can I sit?" Eli hesitated, then gave a small nod. James sat beside him, the low ceiling pressing down. They were eye level now, just two people in the same stillness. No pulpit, no robes, just man and boy. "I brought something," James added. From his coat, he pulled out a photo, a faded picture of himself as a kid, standing barefoot on a farm beside his brothers. "I didn't grow up in a church," he said. "Didn't have much. My mom worked nights. Dad wasn't around. Sometimes we ate saltines for dinner." Eli looked at the photo, then back at James. "I didn't always know where I belonged either," James continued. "But I found my way, and I want to help you find yours." Eli didn't reply, but his shoulders eased. The wall between them had begun to crack. Later that night, James sat in his study, wrestling with what to do. Calling child services felt like the obvious step, but something held him back. He knew that if Eli was returned to the wrong hands, all this fragile trust could be shattered. The system didn't always save kids like him. Sometimes it lost them. So James prayed. Not the kind of prayer you say aloud, but the kind you send out with trembling hands and a desperate heart. And he waited for a sign. The sign came the next morning, not from heaven, but from Eli. For the first time, the boy emerged from the shadows. James was in the kitchen stirring a pot of oatmeal for the church's free breakfast program when he felt a quiet presence behind him. He turned slowly. There, barefoot and pale in the doorway, stood Eli. He looked smaller in the daylight, his hoodie hanging off his shoulders, his hair messy and damp. He clutched a worn backpack tightly against his chest. James didn't speak. He just nodded once and gently slid a bowl of oatmeal across the counter. Eli stepped forward, eyes darting around as if expecting to be yelled at or shoved away. But all he saw was a warm kitchen and a man who made room for him. He ate slowly, every bite cautious. After a few minutes, he whispered, "Can I stay? Just for today?" James smiled. "You can stay as long as you need." That day changed everything. James brought out clean clothes from the church's donation bin. He let Eli shower in the guest bathroom and showed him the little room behind the choir loft where extra chairs were stored. "Just until you're ready," he said. Eli didn't speak much, but his eyes softened. He stayed near James all day, quietly helping fold hymnals, straighten chairs, and wipe tables. That night, James sat in his office, staring at the adoption pamphlet he'd pulled from the back of his drawer, one he'd tucked away years ago after his wife passed, and the idea of family felt too painful to revisit. But now there was a boy upstairs sleeping in a borrowed cot who had asked to stay. And for the first time in years, James didn't feel alone in the church. He felt chosen. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Eli stayed mostly within the church walls, helping James in the mornings, reading quietly in the pews during afternoons, sometimes sneaking into the choir loft to nap in the sunlight that filtered through the stained glass windows. James kept the doors open, but the boy never ventured far. He was still learning to feel safe. James began to see pieces of himself in Eli, the way he flinched at loud noises, how he avoided eye contact when too many people were around, how he always left food on the plate, just in case it had to last until tomorrow. On a Thursday evening after Bible study, James brought out a worn acoustic guitar. "Used to play," he said casually, "mostly hymns, but a little Dylan too." He strummed softly, letting the warm, twangy notes fill the empty sanctuary. To his surprise, Eli sat beside him. "Can you teach me?" the boy asked. James nodded. "Sure. Start with your fingers right here." It was a small thing. But for James, it felt like a miracle. A boy who had once flinched at kindness was now asking to be taught, to create something. The next day, James called a friend in social services. Her name was Carol, someone he trusted. He didn't use Eli's name, just asked general questions. What happens if a kid has no safe place to go? What if he's not ready to be found by the system? Carol sighed on the other end. Sometimes we find a way outside the system, quietly, as long as it's safe. As long as it's love. James hung up and walked to the sanctuary. Eli was sitting in the front pew, quietly plucking at the guitar strings, lips moving silently, as if forming a song no one else could hear. James sat beside him. "Would you ever want to live here officially?" he asked. Eli looked up, and for the first time since they met, he smiled. That night, James drafted a letter, not to child services, not to the school district, but to his congregation. He wrote with trembling hands, unsure how his people, faithful, conservative, proud, would react to the idea of a boy living inside their church. A boy who came from nothing, who had slept in dirt and shadows. But James knew that if they believed in the God he had spent 20 years preaching about, then they needed to believe in Eli too. Sunday morning arrived, bright and cold. The sanctuary filled slowly with familiar faces, farmers, school teachers, young families with squirming toddlers. James stepped up to the pulpit. His voice, usually calm and confident, shook just a little. "I want to tell you all a story," he began, "about someone who was lost and found." He spoke of Eli, not by name, not in detail, but enough to let them feel what he had felt. The pain of abandonment, the miracle of second chances, the quiet kind of love that grows not in grand gestures, but in bowls of soup and shared silence. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then a hand went up in the back. It was Ruth Patterson, the oldest member of the church. "Pastor James," she said, voice firm but kind, "are you asking us to welcome this boy into our flock?" James looked at her and nodded. "Yes, Ruth, I am." She stood slowly and turned to face the congregation. "Then I say we set the table." And just like that, the room shifted. Applause broke out, not thunderous but sure. Several members stood. A few wiped their eyes. A young couple offered extra clothes. Someone else slipped James an envelope of cash with the words, "For him, for whatever he needs." Eli watched from the balcony above, hidden in the shadows. But James could feel it. He was no longer afraid. He was home. In the weeks that followed, the church transformed. What had once been a quiet, traditional congregation became something warmer, softer. The Sunday school kids began drawing pictures for the boy upstairs, even if they hadn't met him yet. A retired carpenter offered to build a proper bedroom in the old choir storage room. He worked for free every evening after supper, whistling hymns as he sawed and hammered. Eli helped paint the walls. James let him pick the color, soft blue, like the sky above the stained glass Jesus behind the pulpit. They added a shelf for books, a reading lamp, and a second-hand desk someone donated anonymously. Each item told Eli, "You belong." Eli enrolled in the local school under James's guardianship. The paperwork took time, and some eyebrows were raised at the district office, but Pastor James was known, respected, and his reputation carried weight. The school counselor called after Eli's first day. "He's quiet," she said, "but polite and sharp." James smiled at the phone. "He's all that and more." One night, Eli came into James's office with a question that caught him off guard. "Do you think God forgot about me?" James paused, setting down his pen. "No," he said, locking eyes with the boy. "I think he was just waiting for the right moment, for you to be found, for us to find each other." Eli nodded, digesting the words. "Because sometimes," James added, "it takes a long time for prayers to reach the right ears." Eli's reply came in a whisper. "Then maybe you were someone else's answer too." James sat back, blinking fast. In that moment, he realized that this wasn't about charity or ministry or even redemption. It was about healing on both sides of the door, and neither of them would ever be the same again. As spring crept into town, life at the church began to feel like something sacred again, not just in scripture, but in the everyday. There was laughter echoing through the halls. The lights in the upstairs room stayed on past sunset. Sometimes James would pass by and hear Eli humming softly while drawing or doing homework. The sanctuary, once solemn, now pulsed with something new, life. Eli started playing music, not just the guitar, but the piano in the corner of the sanctuary that hadn't been touched in years. His fingers found melodies as if they'd been waiting there all along, buried in wood and wire. James would listen from his office, a soft smile on his face. One Wednesday evening, during the midweek prayer service, James paused his sermon and turned toward the piano. "We've had someone among us these past months," he said to the small gathering. "Someone who reminded me that grace isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it hurts before it heals." Then he nodded toward the hallway. Eli stepped out slowly. He looked smaller than usual, his hands tucked into the sleeves of a borrowed sweater. But he walked straight to the piano, sat and began to play. No one breathed for the first few notes. The piece was simple, soft, unsure, but beautiful. Eli didn't look at the crowd. He didn't need to. The music spoke for him. When he finished, silence held the room for a moment. Then came the sound of quiet clapping, not out of politeness, but reverence. Afterward, a man approached James. "Is that the boy from the story?" James nodded. The man nodded back. "Then I believe again." That night, James realized something he hadn't put into words yet. Eli hadn't just found refuge in the church. He had become its heart. Summer brought open windows, the scent of cut grass, and a deeper calm that settled over the church like a blessing. Eli had become part of the rhythm now. He wasn't just the boy upstairs. He was the boy who stacked chairs after service, who helped Mrs. Daniels carry her hymn books, who played piano quietly before the benediction, and the congregation adored him. One afternoon, James found Eli sitting outside on the back steps, legs pulled to his chest, eyes staring out across the field behind the chapel. "You okay?" James asked, sitting beside him. Eli shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." They sat in silence for a while. Then Eli said something James hadn't expected. "I think I'm ready to go see my mom." James didn't respond right away. He just nodded, giving Eli space to continue. "She's in a center now. I found the place online. I've been writing letters. I didn't tell you it because I wasn't sure she'd write back, but she did." James turned fully to him, his voice gentle. "And what did she say?" "She said she's sorry, that she's clean now, that she dreams about me every night." The boy looked down at his hands. "I don't know what I feel, but I want to see her." James placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll go together. You won't do this alone." That weekend they drove 3 hours in silence, through winding roads and long stretches of highway. Eli stared out the window, chewing his thumb. When they arrived at the rehabilitation center, he hesitated at the gate. "You don't have to go in if you're not ready," James said. Eli took a deep breath and stepped forward. And James followed like he had from the very beginning, not as a pastor, not as a rescuer, but as family. The reunion wasn't like a movie. There were no sweeping hugs or sobbing apologies. Just a small room, 2 folding chairs, and a woman with tired eyes sitting nervously across from her son. Eli walked in slowly. His mother rose, unsure whether to reach for him. For a moment, they just looked at each other, 2 people bound by blood and a long, painful silence. Then Eli spoke, barely above a whisper. "Hi." She covered her mouth, nodding, tears spilling without sound. "I didn't know where else to go," he continued. "So I went under a church." She let out a shaky breath. "I prayed you were somewhere safe." James stayed near the door, quiet, watching, holding space. They talked for over an hour, about what had happened, about what might come next, about the time that had been lost. And when it was time to leave, Eli gave her something unexpected. A hug, tentative, awkward, but real. On the drive home, Eli didn't speak much. He stared out the window again, this time with a softness James hadn't seen before. "She's not ready," the boy finally said. James nodded. "Maybe not, but she's trying." Eli looked down at his hands. "So am I." When they arrived back at the church, the sun was setting behind the steeple. James parked the car and turned to Eli. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." "I know," Eli replied, "but I think I want to stay, for now." James smiled. "Then this is your home." That night, as Eli climbed into his bed, the one he helped build, paint, and call his own, James stood at the door, watching the boy pull the blanket over his shoulders. "Good night, son," he said softly, and Eli, already half asleep, whispered back, "Good night, Dad. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you in any way, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what does home mean to you? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories of healing, humanity, and hope. We'll see you in the next one.